Ethan Calloway suddenly stopped in the middle of the rain. Cars moved around him, people rushed past with umbrellas, but he couldn't move. His eyes were locked on something across the street, something he never expected to see again. A small food stall. And behind it, Naomi, his ex-wife. She stood there calmly, serving hot meals to strangers as if this simple life was enough. Her movements were steady, her voice soft, her face peaceful. Not broken. Not bitter. Peaceful. Ethan felt his chest tighten. How did she end up here? The woman he once promised the world, now standing under a worn-out canopy, in the middle of a busy street. But something felt wrong. No, not wrong. Different. Because she didn't look like someone who had lost everything. She looked like someone who had found something. Then his eyes shifted, and everything inside him shattered. A little boy stood beside her. Smiling. Helping. Handing napkins to customers, speaking politely, moving around like he belonged there. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Micah. His son. The same child he hadn't seen in years. The same child whose first steps, first words, first everything, he had missed. Now standing there, growing, living, smiling, without him. Ethan's fingers slowly curled into his palm as a wave of emotion hit him. Micah laughed softly at something Naomi said, then looked up at her with pure love in his eyes. And Naomi, she smiled back the same way she always used to. Warm. Gentle. Complete. For a moment, Ethan felt like a stranger watching someone else's life. Was this the family he once walked away from, or the life he could never get back? The rain softened into a light drizzle, but inside him, the storm only grew stronger. He took a small step forward, then stopped. What right did he have to walk into their world now, after years of silence? He looked around. People were gathering at the stall, greeting Naomi like they knew her. Some even spoke to Micah with affection, like he was part of their everyday life. They weren't surviving. They were living. And somehow, they had built all of this without him. Ethan swallowed hard. His luxurious life, his wealth, his success, none of it mattered in that moment. Because standing there, soaked in rain and regret, he realized something he had never truly understood before. Naomi had found peace. And Micah had found happiness. And neither of them needed him to have it. Ethan stood there in silence, watching from a distance, as the life he once had moved forward without him. Sometimes, the greatest loss isn't what you lose, but realizing they learned to live without you. There was a time when Ethan had everything that truly mattered. Before the wealth. Before the power. Before the silence. It all began on a quiet afternoon at a small charity event. There were no cameras, no luxury, no attention, just a few kind people trying to help others. Ethan had only gone there out of curiosity, not knowing his life was about to change. That's where he saw her. Naomi. She wasn't dressed to impress. No expensive clothes, no makeup to stand out. Just a simple dress, and a heart that showed in everything she did. She was laughing with a group of children, serving food, listening to people like they truly mattered. Ethan found himself watching her longer than he expected. Why does she feel different from everyone else? When their eyes finally met, there was no spark of drama, just a quiet understanding. A soft beginning. They spoke for hours that day. Not about money. Not about success. But about dreams. Values. Life. And somehow, in that simple conversation, something real was born. Days turned into weeks. And weeks into something deeper. Their love didn't grow in luxury. It grew in small moments. Late-night walks under streetlights. Sharing meals on a tiny table. Laughing over nothing. Sitting in silence that felt full, not empty. Ethan, who once chased ambition with restless energy, started to slow down. With Naomi, life didn't feel like a race. It felt like peace. Wasn't this what people truly searched for? A place where the heart could finally rest? They built a small life together. Not perfect. Not grand. But warm. A home filled with simple furniture, soft laughter, and quiet understanding. Naomi would hum softly while cooking. Ethan would watch her, feeling something he had never felt before, contentment. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about the future. He was living in the present. And when Micah was born, everything became even more meaningful. The tiny home filled with a new kind of joy. Sleepless nights, soft cries, little smiles that made everything worth it. Ethan would hold his son, feeling a connection deeper than anything money could ever buy. Naomi would watch them both, her eyes full of love. They didn't have much. But somehow, they had everything. Ethan once believed success meant building something big. But back then, standing in that small home, with Naomi beside him and Micah in his arms, he had already built something priceless. And yet, he didn't realize it. Sometimes, the most valuable life is the one we overlook while chasing something else. Success came faster than Ethan ever imagined, and it began to change everything. What started as a small business idea suddenly turned into something powerful. Deals grew bigger. Meetings became constant. His phone never stopped ringing. People who once ignored him now stood in line just to shake his hand. Ethan was no longer just a dreamer. He was becoming a name. At first, he shared everything with Naomi. Late nights turned into excited conversations about new opportunities. She listened with pride, her eyes shining with belief in him. But slowly, something shifted. The world Ethan stepped into was loud, fast, and filled with people who measured worth differently. They didn't talk about peace. They talked about power. They didn't value simplicity. They valued status. And without realizing it, Ethan began to listen. You've outgrown your old life. You need to think bigger now. People like her, they hold you back. These words didn't hit him all at once. They settled quietly, like drops of water slowly filling a glass. What if they're right? At home, nothing had changed. Naomi was still the same, gentle, supportive, grounded. She still believed in simple joys. Still valued time over money. Still saw Ethan as the man she fell in love with, not the man the world now saw. But to Ethan, that simplicity began to feel small. Conversations that once felt warm now felt distant. He came home later. Spoke less. Listened less. Naomi noticed. Of course she did. She would wait for him at dinner, but the food would grow cold. She would try to talk, but his mind would already be somewhere else. Even Micah, still so young, started to feel the change. There were nights when Ethan walked into the house, and it felt unfamiliar. Like he didn't belong there anymore. How does a home full of love slowly turn into a place of silence? Naomi never complained loudly. She didn't fight. She simply tried harder. But sometimes, trying alone isn't enough. One evening, she softly asked, "Are you okay?" Ethan paused. For a moment, he wanted to say yes. To sit down, to return to the life that once made him feel complete. But instead, he nodded and walked past her. That small moment said more than words ever could. Distance didn't come with a storm. It came quietly. In missed conversations. In unspoken feelings. In hearts slowly drifting apart while standing under the same roof. Ethan thought he was building a bigger life. But in reality, he was stepping further away from the one that truly mattered. And the saddest part? He didn't even realize what he was losing. Sometimes, success doesn't break relationships. It simply reveals what we stop valuing. The night everything broke didn't begin with a storm, it began with silence. The event hall was bright, filled with laughter, music, and powerful people. Ethan stood among them, confident, admired, surrounded by those who now defined his world. Naomi stood beside him. Simple. Quiet. Out of place. She wasn't used to this world, and it showed. The way she held her hands, the way she looked around, unsure. But she was there for him. Always for him. Then it happened. A woman nearby made a soft comment, just loud enough to be heard. Strange. Someone like him with someone like her. A few people laughed quietly. Naomi heard it. Ethan heard it too. For a moment, everything paused. He could have taken her hand. He could have defended her. He could have reminded the world who she truly was. But instead, he stayed silent. And that silence spoke louder than any insult. Naomi's eyes slowly turned toward him. Not angry. Not even surprised. Just hurt. Deep, quiet hurt. So this is who I've become to you? The rest of the night passed like a blur. No words. No connection. Just distance standing side by side. When they reached home, the silence followed them inside.
Naomi gently put Micah to sleep, her movements slow, heavy. Ethan stood near the window, his back turned. Then, finally, she spoke. "Why didn't you say anything?" Her voice was soft, but it carried everything. Ethan didn't turn around. It wasn't a big deal. Those words, they broke something. Naomi took a step closer. "It was a big deal to me." Ethan exhaled sharply, frustration rising. "You don't understand this world, Naomi. Things are different now." Different. That one word created a wall between them. Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed calm. "No, you're different." Silence. Heavy. Final. When did love become something that needed to be defended alone? Ethan turned, his expression cold now, hardened by pride. "Maybe you don't belong in my life anymore." The moment those words left his mouth, everything changed. Even he felt it, but it was too late. Naomi didn't cry. That was the most painful part. She simply nodded, as if something inside her had already accepted this. She walked to the bedroom, picked up Micah gently, and held him close. The baby stirred softly, unaware that his world was about to change. Naomi looked around the house one last time, not with anger, but with goodbye. She walked past Ethan, stopping for just a second beside him. He didn't move, didn't stop her, didn't speak. And then she walked out. The door closed softly behind her. No noise, no drama, just an ending. Ethan stood there alone, the silence now louder than ever. But even then, he didn't go after her, because in that moment, he chose pride and lost love. Sometimes it only takes one sentence to destroy what took years to build.
The woman he thought would break chose to rebuild instead. That night, Naomi walked away with nothing but a small bag, a sleeping child in her arms, and a heart quietly holding itself together. No destination. No plan. Just faith. The first few days were the hardest. A small rented room. Thin walls. A single bed. Nights filled with silence, and the soft breathing of little Micah beside her. There were moments when exhaustion would hit her so deeply, she could barely move. But every morning, she still stood up. For him. She took small jobs, cleaning, helping in kitchens, anything she could find. Her hands grew tired, her body weak, but she never let Micah feel it. In front of him, she smiled. She laughed. She made their small world feel safe. "I can't fall apart. Not when he needs me this much." There were days when she had to choose between rest and survival. And she always chose survival. Slowly, something began to change. People started noticing her. Not for what she had lost, but for how she carried herself. Her kindness. Her honesty. The way she treated others, even when she had so little. An elderly woman she once helped offered her a small corner outside her shop. "Start something of your own," she said gently. At first, Naomi hesitated. Could she really do it? But then she looked at Micah, holding her hand, trusting her without question. And she decided to try. A small food stall. Nothing fancy. Just simple, homemade meals made with care. The first day, she sold only a few plates. The second day, a few more. Then people started coming back. Not just for the food, but for her. Her warmth. Her quiet strength. The way she remembered faces, listened to stories, smiled without pretending. Micah grew up beside that stall. Watching. Learning. Helping. He would hand out napkins, greet customers, stand proudly next to his mother like he belonged there, because he did. They didn't have luxury, but they had something deeper. Peace. Isn't it strange how a broken life can slowly become whole again, without the person who once meant everything? Seasons passed. The stall became known in the neighborhood. People respected her, trusted her, supported her. Naomi no longer looked like someone who had been left behind. She looked like someone who had moved forward. And through it all, she never spoke badly of Ethan. Not once. Because her strength wasn't built on anger. It was built on growth. At night, when everything became quiet again, she would sometimes look at Micah sleeping, and smile softly. Not because life was easy, but because she had survived it, and turned it into something meaningful. Sometimes, losing everything is the beginning of becoming someone stronger than you ever imagined. Ethan sat in his glass office, the city lights reflecting off the polished surfaces around him. Everything gleamed with success: luxury cars in the garage, rare art on the walls, deals that others would kill for. Yet, the room felt colder than the winter winds outside. He poured himself a drink, staring out at the skyline. The emptiness pressed in on him like a heavy fog. The laughter he once longed for, the laughter of a family, of a son, was gone. Replaced by silent echoes of boardroom meetings and empty congratulations. Was this really what I wanted all along? Memories began to surface, unbidden. Naomi's soft laugh as she stirred morning coffee. Micah running toward him with arms wide open. The small, chaotic dinners where they argued and laughed and simply existed together. Each memory stung like fire against his chest. Success had given him wealth, power, and admiration. But the moments that truly mattered, the ones filled with love, with warmth, with life, had slipped quietly through his fingers. And now, even surrounded by luxury, he felt poorer than ever. He walked through his mansion, each empty room a reminder. The echo of his own footsteps was the only sound. No little feet running across the hall. No tiny hand in his, tugging him toward adventure. Just silence. Even the awards, the trophies, the news clippings, they felt meaningless. They could never replace the softness of family. The laughter he had traded for ambition haunted him relentlessly. I thought I could buy happiness, but money never hugged me back. Late at night, Ethan stared at his reflection in the mirror. His eyes looked sharp, successful, but they lacked the light that once belonged to them. That warmth he had taken for granted. Naomi and Micah had it now, living it fully without him. He tried to reach out, tried to call, but each time fear and pride blocked him. And in those quiet moments, he realized the truth: some opportunities lost can never return. Some moments missed can never be reclaimed. He thought about Naomi working tirelessly at her food stall, raising their son with love and dignity, smiling through struggle. The realization hit him like lightning. His world of gold and glass could never fill the void they had left behind. How did I climb so high, only to fall so completely? The pain was sharp, undeniable, and inescapable. Yet it was also a lesson. Ethan understood now that ambition without heart, wealth without love, power without family, it was all emptiness. He sank into his chair, the city sprawling endlessly below. And in the quiet, bitter truth of his life, he whispered to himself, I had everything. And yet, I had nothing that mattered. True wealth is not counted in dollars, but in love and presence shared with those who matter most. Ethan stood across the small food stall, watching Naomi move with effortless grace, her hands busy but her eyes warm as she smiled at a customer. Micah ran past him laughing, and for a moment, Ethan felt the old ache in his chest, the longing he had carried for years. But this time, there was no pride to block him, no excuses to hide behind. He took a deep breath, stepped forward, and offered the simplest gesture he could, a genuine smile and a helping hand. Day by day he returned, small acts of kindness, quiet presence, showing that he had changed, not with words, but with actions. Naomi noticed, of course. She was cautious, protective, but slowly, the walls she had built around her heart began to soften. Could she ever trust me again? Ethan wondered, the thought heavy but sincere. He helped Micah tie his apron, shared a laugh over spilled ingredients, and listened when Naomi spoke, really listened, without interruption or judgment. Each moment was a bridge, each smile a step toward healing what had been broken. He didn't demand forgiveness, didn't rush reconciliation. Instead, he learned patience, humility, and the quiet power of showing love through consistent care. Evenings found them together, not lavish dinners, not grand gestures, just simple conversations and shared meals. Ethan discovered that redemption wasn't in grand declarations. It was in the ordinary, in proving through steady presence that he had grown, that he had learned from the mistakes that had once cost him everything. And then one afternoon, as Micah ran to Ethan with a drawing he had made, Naomi watched them with a gentle smile. There was still caution in her eyes, but there was also hope. She had seen change, and she recognized the courage it took to rebuild trust. Maybe love can be given again, not because it's easy, but because it's earned, Ethan thought quietly, watching the small family moment unfold. At last, Naomi extended her hand, not as a surrender, but as a choice of strength. Love, she realized, wasn't weakness. It was the courage to believe in someone again when their actions spoke louder than their words. Ethan took her hand, feeling the warmth that had been missing for so long, a promise of a future they could shape together. Laughter filled the little food stall, the air light with a sense of belonging and renewal. It was not perfection. They still had scars, still had moments of doubt, but they had each other, and that made all the difference. Sometimes, the heart's greatest gift is giving love a second chance, earned through humility, patience, and true change.